this will be ubiquitous and it will be part of the modern enrollment tech stack. And it'll be fast as we see technology moves at a whole different pace than when you and I were first deploying CRMs when they first came out.
Yes, correct.
This is just going to be a couple of years, and this is going to be ubiquitous, and it's just going to be how we process data. And it's going to give us the time and the precision to be more strategic with our enrollment teams and with our students.
Folks, I've really been excited to get this conversation. I know my guest today is also been jumping at the bit for us to finally connect to get this episode recorded and to share with you. Welcome back. I have with me today Geoff Baird. Geoff, welcome to the show. Let me just do a quick introduction and then you can share with everyone what I miss. Geoff, you're the founder and CEO of Enroll. And Geoff's at the forefront of modernizing higher ed enrollment management through your innovative AI product, Enroll. You've got expertise in harnessing the power of data, deep data, things that I love to talk about, things that I think are critical in our world, but harnessing that power of deep data and understanding with AI to revolutionize core operational processes. Your career's almost, I don't know who's had a longer career yet as a professional. You're right. You say close to 3 decades. I'm pretty close to 3 decades, so we're close there. But yours has really been dedicated. That's right. But I know your career has been dedicated to identifying, executing, and delivering on strategies that improve revenue, operating performance, balance sheets, cash flow, and liquidity. Now, those last 3, I will say we don't talk about all that much in higher ed. So that tells me your career has been across several, at least 2, but maybe several verticals in your time. So Geoff, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. And maybe why don't we just start off with telling us a little bit about the types of verticals that you've worked in and how that's really brought you to higher ed or connects to higher ed.
Well, it's actually, I think at last count, I think it was actually my career's 7 verticals.
7. That's a lot of verticals.
Last, almost 10 years being in higher ed. And, what was, what's sort of interesting and unique about my career is I sort of established a reputation as essentially a performance and operational turnaround person. That it turns out that is pretty transportable between industries. Once you sort of understand how the mechanics of a market work, tuning the machine for that market is, there's a lot of common knowledge. Now, there's let's say it's 80-20, right? There's this sort of 80% that's common and 20% that's unbelievably unique. And look, I have been in higher ed for almost a decade now, and I'm still learning little things, every single day. But truly, my entry into higher ed, I came straight out of running a multi-$100 million business. And I got a call from an old who said, we're working with some colleges and universities, and, this is 8-9 years ago now, who are really struggling financially and operationally. And, do you want to come in and take a look at this? And, 8 or 10 years later, I'm still in here working in higher ed. And what was interesting though was, there's in the commercial world, there's sort of 2 types of turnaround people. A majority of the turnaround people are really, sort of in this category of restructuring, and we've all seen this, and we've seen it outside of higher ed, inside of higher ed. I was actually in a smaller group of turnaround people who turned around financial and operational performance by changing the top line, by growing. And so, that it's one of the reasons why, I got jobs and got, offers to go help people who are in trouble. But where it's relevant to our conversation here is when I first came into higher ed, and I'm now looking not at balance sheets and profit and loss statements and cash flows of private businesses, but of nonprofit colleges. My bias, where I immediately start jumping into, was students. How do we get more students? Why can't we? What are the barriers? How does this work? And I studied that, deeply. And when I say deeply, I mean sort of top to bottom. How do we acquire leads, right? What is going on with demographics? Up to including, and this is not an exaggeration, but hundreds of hours that I sat with admissions counselors, just sat with them and listened to them and watched how they spend their day. I mean, I sat with admissions counselors at 7:30 in the morning when they came in, and was there at, with the late shift at 7:30 at night if they had that. And, the whole point was to understand, how does this work? And is there opportunity to make it better? Can we make it better? Can we make it better for the institution? Can we make it better for the student? And can we make it better for the admissions teams themselves? And that was really the transition from, a commercial life into higher ed. And obviously what that spawned, 7-8 years into it, was a standalone product, right? That sort of tackled some of these problems that I was seeing.
What I'm hearing is you sat with everyone, then decided you had to pivot because you couldn't find any opportunity for improvements.
No, I wouldn't say had to pivot. Because
I'm joking there, because I have a feeling you could fill a tractor trailer full of ideas of ways we could improve how we operate.
But really, I mean, yes, right. I mean, that's true everywhere. It's true everywhere. Yeah. And really, the interesting question is, there's always way too many ideas and opportunities, and how do you sift through them and isolate down to a few that you can focus on deeply and make sure you execute? Because one of the is sort of a real challenge in terms of turning around performance is oftentimes not coming up with the ideas. It's trying to execute too many of them at the same time, and consequently not executing them completely. And there's always this question of, when something doesn't work, was it the strategy that was wrong, or was it the execution that was wrong? Yep. And in my experience, 8 or 9 out of 10 times, the strategy was sound. It was the execution that just didn't quite get to the end, and didn't quite execute with the level of commitment and discipline that it requires to implement a new process, for example.
I would say in my world, the biggest gap has been having the right information to really determine, was it strategy execution, because you don't fully document or collect the information to make that assessment. So if it's a strategy for putting more bodies at the top of an enrollment funnel, we aren't tracking those metrics, capturing all of the sources for the leads that they came in, to really understand all of the effort we put into finding them, getting them into the funnel, and or the data on how we actually executed and communicating with that prospective student, or trying to engage with that prospective student to confirm the fit with them. We don't have both. Normally both, we don't have the information on both of those sides, but one of them usually is typically a little further behind than the other. And therefore, when we pivot or extend even into a specific strategy, we're doing it without the right information to know with more certainty, not complete certainty, but at least enough certainty to know this is what we should be doing. But that gap seems to be there.
Yeah, it's it's interesting in terms of, if we zoom out, we're both in the business of helping to drive a more effective, efficient enrollment, right, for our respective customers and with our respective customers. And that's the part of the industry we're in. And if we zoom out from that, it's really kind of interesting. And I think this is really important to do sometimes. And it's really difficult in this particular industry to be able to take a breath have a moment of time to reflect, because the amount of pressure in this industry it's relentless and it's nonstop. It doesn't end. Really, this is really unique as compared to regular commercial environments. But when you zoom out, you think about what we've done over the last, let's say, decade, 10, 15 years with regards to enrollment, is we've been systematically reducing friction in the enrollment process, really to try and open up access, right? That was, sort of the original intention, was to open up access. So, think about all of the things that reduce friction, some of which were driven by higher ed, some of which were market forces. Common App, right? The ability to apply to, a whole bunch of institutions at the same time. We have direct admit now. There is, there's the test optional movement, right? Which is, still active in some and being clawed back in others. Those are all things that were done to remove the friction of the enrollment process, the admission process. At the same time, some things we can't control in terms of the industry, access to information, right? The student has almost perfect access to information now. That's a huge, huge shift. They used to have to come to the institution. When I was looking at colleges, I had to buy a book. I had to order the big giant book. That was the only way to get information on the colleges in America. And reducing this friction resulted in more applications, more in the top. Now, at the same time that we were reducing friction, investment also increased. This is something that a lot of us actually in this industry may not be aware of, but higher ed, top to bottom, spends almost $10 billion a year to acquire new students. It's a big dollar amount, right? Yes. That is going towards acquisition. It's not going towards education. And those dollars are relatively inefficient because of the fact that so much is coming in the top. And, I sat on the side of the table, with my agencies and my list providers and, all sorts of other people who were helping to fill the top. And there's a feedback loop that can be very difficult, which is, if we just get more into the top, eventually more will come out of the bottom. But that's not what's happening. Actually, more in the top is, it's reducing yield. And for most institutions, it's not pulling more on the bottom. And so the reason why this is relevant is we worked on this problem at the top of the funnel. Yes. What we have not done is modified what has to happen in the middle of the funnel. Yep. And quite frankly, that is exactly where I focused in before Enroll ML was, hey, we're actually doing pretty well at the top of the funnel. We've got sophisticated campaigns where we've got, great paid search. We feel we're pretty dialed in with our lists and our geographies and our profiles and our demographics, but our yield rate's 12 or our yield rate's 15. And I like to talk about this because it's one of the things I think sometimes, again, when we miss the forest for the trees occasionally. A yield rate of 15%. Let's just talk about what that means for the institution. We had, as an institution, we had to spend money to acquire 100 applications. We had to convince, when there's thousands of institutions, 100 kids or adults, if it's adult, online, whatever it is, 100 people to pick our institution as one of the ones that they apply to. And that's a huge accomplishment because there's a lot of competition out there. But of that 100, a 15% yield rate means only 15 said yes, right? 85 said no. And we got them. We got to that short list. And we got 100 to that short list. And what's really interesting about that math is inside the 85 that we got to actually apply to our institution and, not hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of others. If we could find just 3 more inside of that 85 who said no, and if we could have gotten to them and helped them perhaps see that our institution was a wonderful, wonderful fit for them, it would drive fantastic, outcomes. 3 more equates to a 20% enrollment growth for the institution. And I remember having these conversations with my marketing and admissions leaders that I was working with. And at first, people got out calculators and they said that can't be right. It can't just be that the 3 more in that group is 20% enrollment growth. And it is right. And it's not easy, but when you talk about strategy to execution, our strategy became, look, we know inside that 85, there are some people in that 85 where they applied to 15 schools. We were last. They weren't going to come here. There are others that can't. They, for various reasons, family, financial, whatever it may be, they can't attend college. But there's still a group of students in the middle where we were, in the active top decision set. And the challenge was we didn't know how to find them. And that really was what that became my mission. And that became our execution. Our strategy was, hey, we're doing really well. We're really happy with what we're doing at the top of the funnel. Our strategy is we are going to focus in the middle funnel in a new way. And then it becomes execution. But that's really the path that led to, how do we drive a more effective, efficient, and personalized experience for those students who are truly interested in our institution.
So that's your impetus. From there, over a little time, you create Enroll ML. What does it do? Well,
what's interesting about my particular founder story, right, as a founder of an AI software platform, and specifically the machine learning branch of AI, and the obviously a majority of the press is around ChatGPT and generative AI that that talks to you and starts to think. The another branch of the AI tree is machine learning, which is more math, more around math and prediction. And what's interesting about my particular founder story is that I built Enroll ML for my own use. I didn't build it for the market, and used it for 2 years. And it really was the result of using it for 2 years every day with VP of enrollment, directors, counselors, transition of counselors, cycle. And it was the result of that convinced me that, this would be valuable for the rest of the market, that this could actually help. And so that the genesis of it is a little bit different. But what it does, it really, what happened was, because I have a background in tech in my early career, I've always sort of, kept a few fingers in the tech pie. And what I saw happening with machine learning in particular was it's exceedingly complex what's happening. But to understand it is fairly simple, which is it's way more compute power. And what I realized is I used this statement before, I'll use it again, which is, in my experience and my belief now, in enrollment, subjectivity is where yield goes to die. And I say this to go back to, the hundreds of hours I sat with the teams and saw how many times they had to make a subjective decision, a guess. And I would offer this up because this is something that led me down my journey, which is ask your team when they come in, go ask a couple of people when they come in the morning, how are you starting your day? Where are you going? There's only 8 hours in the day, and we have more people than there are time to give appropriate attention to. How are you doing it? And what I will virtually guarantee is you're going to get, if you ask 5 different people, you're going to get 5 completely different answers.
Yep.
And so what machine learning opened up was the ability to go exponentially deeper into the data. Everyone now is doing some type of predictive analytics. Generally, it's based on building a basic profile of your student that enrolls. You then may layer on a particular stage of the funnel they're in. And those are all the things that we were doing with our existing kind of yield rates and enrollment rates. And what machine learning opened up was just, a much, much deeper level of precision, I like to, equate it to, a medical chart, right? Instead of just tracking, 3 or 4 or 5 things, why not track 200 things? And in particular, the unique relationship between them. And that's really what machine learning opened up, was this level of precision. And what we started seeing, and what we're seeing with Enroll ML, is really the ability to identify some untapped opportunity and some unrecognized risk in the enrollment funnel. And I'll just describe that for a second, which is when we're able to now every single day not look at 2 or 3 or 4 elements of the student record to assess where are they really, what's the state of the funnel, right? The fact that we've got the compute power and the algorithms now to look at 100 simultaneous things. We now have the ability to identify things, and I'll just give 2 very simple scenarios, because this is effectively what we're pulling out, which is sets of students who have deposited but are not behaving in the way that students who enroll behave. And I don't mean just doing the deposit or just coming to an event. I mean the combination of 100 different things and their specific combination. And what does that potentially signal? Melt risk, right? Yep. If you've got someone, we say we've got the deposit, but they're not behaving across these ways. And the inverse would be people who are behaving across all of these measures at an exceedingly high rate, but haven't yet deposited. And without machine learning, without that sort of computational power, we just haven't been able to get at that. And that's really where incremental yield, is gonna come from.
So here's my question. So we're looking at about 100 things, 100 points of data.
It's actually
how do you know which 100 points?
I was just trying to make it a little simple, but it is. Yeah. It's a massive amount. Yeah.
So how do we know what the right 100 points of data are?
Well, this again is what got opened up with AI.
Yep. Yes.
And I say this as someone as a career data person and someone who built data systems as well as used them for years and years, up until the last, let's say, 2 years or 3 years ago, right? The best we could do was some institutions had resources or capabilities or partners that could do kind of deep linear regressions and try and identify what are the patterns. And I use that word linear because that is a core element of statistical regression, is linear relationships between an outcome and a variable. What machine learning opened up was the ability to identify nonlinear relationships. The net is that you're handing machine learning and AI algorithms your data set out of your CRM. And what you're asking it to do is hey, can you find the patterns to predict an enrollment? And by the way, I'm not going to give you the obvious easy data. I'm not going to give you the fact that they came to admitted student day, right? Or that they turned in their housing form, right? Those are all signals. So you have to pull those out. We actually refer to those as cheat codes. And in enrollment data, there's a lot of that. And so you machine learning models can look at the CRM data, and they basically are able to go through, with a compute power that hasn't existed, and just look at deeper and deeper relationships and these decision trees that are created, right? All of these items they're looking at, they're going down versions of yes, no. And what we're effectively asking the machine learning model is, can you accurately predict who will deposit or who will enroll? And in some cases, it comes back and says, no, I can't. But what we found with most, in fact, we haven't discovered one yet that can't, but that is most certainly a very viable, situation. Yep. But what we figured out is that for most institutions, the data inside their CRM is deep enough that the machine learning model can come back and say, yes, I can predict accurately. I can predict exceedingly accurately. And what the path we took, which is a little bit different than where the majority of the industry was, is that our objective here is not to actually create a prediction. There's lots of mechanisms we use to create and predict the class. Those exist, and they're very sophisticated. And I had, I bought those services from the major players. What I was interested in was not what's the prediction, but I wanted to see, can we train machine learning models to predict accurately? And that answer is yes. But then where we took a little bit of a left turn was, I want to know how. I don't want to know just what the prediction is. And so we cracked open the models. And what we now pull out is not what's the prediction, but what are those moments? What are those critical? What are the time windows, right? What are the combination of time windows and activities and actions and behaviors of the student that you're looking at that allows you to predict like that? Because if we can pull those out, we now have the ability to potentially impact at those moments. And that was the problem I had with the prediction was I knew what the prediction was, but I didn't know how to impact it with my team.
Yep. And that's the difference maker with the product, right? It's not just a prediction or a score likelihood. It's here are the missing pieces to move the prediction up or down.
Yeah.
Right. And to help, because then it goes back to those notes you took on as you were meeting with counselors and watching what they did, so that it's not just subjective. We can say with more clarity, here are the people to connect with. Here are the activities to connect with them on. With that level of clarity that then drive those middle of the funnel people that we have more data about, that we have that understanding and now have a score about. But it's, again, not just a score. It's here are the key drivers for students. That's what we're doing, correct?
And yes. And what we're looking at, though, I mean, here's really, again, we're going to zoom out for a minute. The funnel, the serial nature of a sales funnel is our creation, right? As an institution. That's not how a consumer evaluating a product or an institution thinks. They don't think in the serial nature of the funnel, step. And
correct.
This is really what we've been able to unlock is what we're looking at is the behaviors of the student. Yep. And those behaviors, regardless of where they are in the funnel. And that's why I can give the example. Yep. I could show you every single one of our customers right now. I could pull up their Enroll ML dashboard and show you within 3 seconds, a list of students who have deposited, but their behaviors should raise concern. So you know what? Go to them. If you want to hold on to those students, the ones who have deposited, they've taken a traditional step in the funnel, and they're behaving across all of the combination of these behaviors in a way that suggests they're going to enroll. Great. You've got them. You'll have them at an exceedingly high rate. And so those behaviors, and Mickey, this is what I'm going to say for anyone watching this, is this, I am convinced that, what we are on the beginning, the beginning stages of here is something that's going to just be a common element of the modern enrollment stack in 3 to 4 years. Yep. It is that powerful and relatively easy. Again, this is not the branch of AI chatbot. This is the branch of massive compute power to understand your data, to make your teams more efficient and effective, and change the experience, for the institution and for the students. And it's really astounding. I would say, for a little bit of a plug here, not for the company or the product, but we did just publish a white paper. It's on our website. And the white paper is not the white paper. What I wanted to do was give to the market essentially what are the learnings from 3 years of live machine learning deployments and admissions. And so I would offer up, for anyone who is thinking about this, doing it or looking at it, or as we're seeing some of our customers and friends and associates using it in preparation for meetings with cabinet and CIOs or whoever it may be. But it's, we essentially gave away some of our secrets that we've identified around the criticality of things like feature engineering and how time series behaviors of students are in some ways more predictive of what their state of mind is than the actual actions they're taking with the institution. And so I would offer up, we wanted to sort of give that to the market.
Yes.
And, as I put in a recent LinkedIn post, I've had people ask me, aren't you also giving that to your competitors? The answer is yes, I am. We are, because I think this can have is going to have a seismic impact on enrollment management. And, the faster we all get there, the better.
So, there are a few points that I want to call out here. We talked several times. You shared some examples when we talk about, who might be a risk for a melt. So, but the tool itself isn't just focused on the melt after deposit. It covers the funnel. But when I'm thinking of it from a melt perspective, I see two scenarios often with schools. Like, I don't have enough time. We're worried about melt, but I just don't have enough time and staff to hit all the students. This helps you know which students to really focus on. Two, I have some clients though that say, we're good with that. We're talking to all the students doing this, but here's the thing. Not necessarily, because you don't know necessarily what to be talking to the students about. And this is going to help you identify those talking points so that those conversations, you might be touching them all, but you're still losing students in melt. And so this helps you identify what to have those conversations about with students that will then potentially find you those 3 more students just in those conversations. So those are two scenarios I see really different issues, but it helps both of those. And one other thing I wanted to talk about in that stood out to me. Now I've just lost my train of thought, so I've got to go regroup that. Data driven. That was the other thing, and this is really big because there's not a higher ed institution that's not saying they're data driven. They've been saying it for about 25 years, and the reason they've been saying it primarily is because the accrediting bodies are saying you got to leverage data to make decisions. They've been saying that, so they've moved into a data-driven mode. But let's just say this for the record: with a tool like EnrollML that's providing this level of insight, if you don't come to this level of insight, especially in the next 3 to 5 years, you can say you're data-driven, but you're not data-driven if you don't use tools like this to take the data, to take it to a deeper insight, because this is insight you can't do on your own right now. And if you're going to be data-driven and institutions are using tools like EnrollML, maybe they're using different tools for different use cases of data across different departments, divisions, and so forth. But if there are institutions using that and getting those insights and taking action on it, and you're not, they're data-driven, because the data is driving what they're doing at a level 3, 4, 10 times deeper than what you're able to do. So you can say you're data-driven, but the speed with which you're able to let the data drive is in first gear when others are in fourth and fifth gear, and the gap between you and them is only going to grow at a speed. It's going to grow at an increasing speed. So it's going to grow, and it's going to grow faster and faster and faster until you find ways to leverage the data to move at the speed that this type of technology will provide.
Yeah. Yes to all those things. And, it's interesting in a market where a lot of, of the vendors that deal in the enrollment market, in a market where they are selling enrollments. And of course, that's what we're seeking if we're on the institution side of the table. We sell something a little bit differently or different, which is what we're really delivering is time and precision to the team.
Yes.
The amount of time trying to figure out the data. And even when we say we do say we're data driven, and interestingly enough, between 30 and 50% of admissions teams' time. And I know this because we did a work time study with 22 institutions that identified that somewhere between 30 and 50% of their time is spent staring at their data. And that's with advanced CRM implementations, with, a fairly complex understanding of the basic profiles and demographics, and let's call it the univariate or even multivariate probabilities, right? If these 2 or 3 things happen, we have a higher probability. And that consumes an immense amount of time. And you're right, the power that we have now to understand the data not only deeper, but faster is what creates time and precision. And with time and precision, let's go back to we're talking to all the students. And I'll use my, me eating my own dog food, right? When we first figured out that Enroll ML worked before it was named Enroll ML, when it was just a thing we built internally and we're using. I'll give a perfect operational example of this is we saw students who were displaying positive behaviors that suggested that we were in the top 2 or 3, but they hadn't committed yet. And it was very easy for the counselors to say, well, I talked to Mickey. With Enroll ML as a leader, I had the ability to say, whoa, hold on. We're not going by Mickey that quickly, right? Because Mickey is showing all of these things. We're going to spend a little more time on and a little more strategy on a smaller number of people. I'm going to go back to subjectivity. Without Enroll ML, as someone who is trying to help the team focus in on where to give us our best shot of improving enrollment, when that counselor said to me, talk to Mickey, I'm moving on, there was nothing I could say. I had to trust, right? And I love trusting. But there were times where the data suggested, wait, don't bounce off this person so quickly. Let's not bounce off them because of the fact that we're now seeing things in the data that we've never been able to see. And what we're seeing is behavior. I'd like to think, I do think that this is the closest we've come to seeing the thought bubble on top of someone's head, a prospective student. But both cases, right, can be you can say with a straight face, legitimately, we are data driven. It's just, are you leveraging the depth of data insight, and are you leveraging with the frequency, right? And we have the ability now to do this level of processing every single night. And again, the output of this is not a magic enrollment. What it is time and precision. And, admissions leaders that I know, that's the thing I hear them say is, if we had more time, right? And part of that time is the precision. Where do I spend that more time? We can move the needle. We can make a difference. Yep. And that's one of the things we don't have. And it is, you're absolutely right. The definition of data driven from even 2 years ago is
needs to be elevated.
Different. Yeah.
It needs to be elevated to be clear what it really means as an institution, as a department or division, how we're going to leverage. Because if you can say how, then you can start to define what data you really need to be able to do those things. But if you don't take a look at what's out there to understand tools like Enroll ML, then you don't know the extent of what you can do with data or how much data you really need. You don't know because if you're doing this on your own, you think, oh, I've got these 50 points. That may not be the right 50 points. And by the way, your tool's using way more than that. And so when you're talking about confidence in a score, in a prediction, the more data you have, the more confidence you're going to have. And so 50 data points was great 3 years ago. That's not great anymore. That's scratching the surface. And 50 actually was a really good number. 3. I mean, we have schools that are like,
that's a lot.
I've got some emails I've sent. What can you do with that?
Well, here's the thing, here's one of the tips. And again, I'll offer up the white paper to sort of help everyone, who wants to dig in. But let me offer this up because
we will have a link, by the way, to the white paper in the show notes. So you'll see that in the description.
To give an example of, and just to be really clear, the white paper is not a sales pitch for Enroll ML.
Yeah, I've got it up, folks. So you're right. It is good. It's a real white paper of information that is being shared to help you understand. It's not a sales pitch for sure.
We analyzed 2,000 markers that were identified by the machine learning models across 10 different customers and really, documented sort of the patterns. And here's an example though, to your point. In a regular implementation, we might pull in 40 million rows of data out of the CRM. From those 40 million rows, right, inside of all of those rows, which is all the row level detail. And again, let's just start with that number in and of itself. Again, we're talking about compute power that's, wasn't really feasible until AI. But in a recent model that we trained and developed for an R1, we actually pulled in 40 some odd million rows. I think it was more than that because they had they're a huge institution. From that, we identified 157 native data elements that were part of the predictive model. A native data element is the exact thing you would just query out of Salesforce. It's all the usual suspects of events and actions and messages and things, right? 157 of those. From those 157, we actually engineered 600 new data elements. And the concept of feature engineering is one of the big breakthroughs that we just haven't, again, had the sort of capability and the tools to do up until this point. When I talk about an engineered feature, and this is one of the things that's in the white paper because it's one of the aha moments for this type of technology that we will all be deploying. Engineered features are combining things from the CRM that are not natively combined in the CRM. They are looking at date differences, for example, between two what appear to be unrelated events, right? That we're not querying, we're not building dashboards around. We may not even have access to the row level date stamps that are happening, right? In terms of the traditional interfaces. So we pulled in 100 and identified 157 native data elements right out of Salesforce, all the usual suspects. From that, we created 600 new data elements that do not exist in Salesforce and have never existed in Salesforce. And we fed that entire, whatever that is, 850 into the AI. And the AI, with some data science tuning, eventually comes back and says, hey, I can predict an enrollment at 93% accuracy. And by the way, we take out the cheat codes and, we have to sort of go through that exercise. But what was interesting is, of course, what we're doing is cracking it open. And probably the biggest aha moment was that 17 of the top 20 features that the AI was using to predict at a 93% accuracy were engineered features. They were not the native data elements. And this is an example. I'm sort of highlighting a little bit the difference between the current view of data-driven, which is I know those 157 and I run queries on those. The next set of data-driven, which is already here, is the concept of I take those 157 and we actually create new data elements. And as it turns out, the newly created data elements are actually more predictive and more insightful. And again, that's what allows us, that's what this big step that's allowed us to dramatically increase this level of precision of understanding where people are. And so, yes, that was a long answer to a simple question, which is, are we really data driven as we say we are? And, let's kind of go back to the adoption curve on this is happening so quickly. And the fact of the matter is, it's not terribly, what I just described is unbelievably complex from a math standpoint, but is done in a couple of weeks, right? So, and it's going to, that timeline to be able to deploy and snap these in is going to be faster and faster.
And what we are seeing, I would say, and we're coming up on time. So but what I'm seeing though is you say you got 157 elements of data. That's today. 2 years from now, that might be 357 or 400. And so when you start taking that quantity, when you start looking at your engineered pieces, what does that look like? It's not 600 anymore. I don't know what it is, maybe 5,000. I don't know what that turns into. Yeah. I'm not smart enough from a mathematical perspective to put that into a number form to spit something out and say, but it's not going to be 700 or 800. It's not going to go for 600, 800.
Right. It's not going to be something that as humans, we're not going to be running lists and queries that sort of say, well, a gray hair guy in Denver enrolls at this rate and it changes if he's got this particular other, profile, right? That mindset is going to shift to, we're always looking at the real-time relationship of hundreds and hundreds of simultaneous moments in time.
And I think my point there is that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the speed with which you're going to fall behind without this type of computational power. Because if you're still pulling lists 3 years from now, you might be increasing the amount of data you're putting in your list, but all these engineered pieces that you're talking about, the pieces that aren't in a CRM today that you're creating through this modeling process, you can't replicate that. And so if we know we're getting more data. That is happening, absolutely happening. We're getting more data. But if you're still using the old way to capture that data and you're using the new way, and maybe the newer new way that comes out of this, and the gap between what you'll be able to do and what you're able to do without it is just much, much greater by multiple factors. And so that's really what I want folks to start thinking about and realizing, to know we have to put this into our strategy. We have to find ways to start leveraging technology like this, because if we don't, the potential risk of not doing it when other schools around you could be really significant. And it's going to happen faster than the rise up from the enrollment cliff will occur to start feeding you more organic people into your pipeline. And so that's a big risk I want folks to start thinking about with this.
Well, and Mickey, this is why I talk about this with the language around the modernization of enrollment management, right? This is a huge element of it. And I still think, we're going to need admissions counselors, and we're going to, this is a huge life decision and financial decision for our students. And we're still going to need, they're going to need more personalized attention. And the modernization is deploying the tools and technology that gives us the ability to serve the institution with a more efficient, effective enrollment process. To serve,
you're not trying to find the students who need that conversation. The system's already telling you who needs a conversation.
Right.
Otherwise, you might need to hire 3 more people to have that level of personalization that students and families expect.
Look,
you might have to double your team if you don't know.
We have a customer who reported back that their call completion rate went up 20%. And the reason is because they are able to, from the moment they come in the morning, hone in instantly on students that are, again, displaying the combination of behaviors that suggest, I need some help. I need some contact to move forward.
Context. We need that context.
Yeah. Students who won't. Yeah. I believe that admissions leaders and the data teams and the CRM teams that support them, I think there's a wonderful opportunity to go back up to the cabinet and say, we recognize that, we've been doing everything we can and we know how to do. We are going to continue to strive to make this portion of the institution more efficient, cost-effective, and effective by the way, for the institution, the students, and the teams themselves. And that's what modernizing it is. And there's again, I'll say this right now. We can check the timestamp on 8/15, 2024 when we're taping this, Mickey. But this is not an if. It's going to happen. This will be ubiquitous, and it will be part of the modern enrollment tech stack. And it'll be fast as we see, technology moves at a whole different pace than when you and I were first deploying CRMs when they first came out.
Yes. Correct.
This is just going to be a couple of years, and this is going to be ubiquitous, and it's just going to be how we process data, and it's going to give us the time and the precision to be more strategic with our enrollment teams and with our students.
Well, I think there's the pausing point in the conversation. Geoff, thank you so much for joining for this. This is such an important, to me, an episode where it's important, but it's one we can geek out on. We really get to talk a little bit more in the weeds in terms of what, when we say data-driven or context-driven, I really prefer that term because the data gives us the context we really need. But when we talk about that, what that's looked like, and we're diving a little bit into the future here of talking about the speed. But this is so important. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us and sharing this. Everyone, thanks for watching, for listening. We're really excited to continue with more real deep conversations like this in the next few weeks. Geoff, again, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.